I had a master's degree in education, in theology, and an undergraduate degree in philosophy, none of which are very valuable for job searches. But anyway, this was a time of full employment in America, and so my first job was being a computer analyst for RCA Computer Systems. Now, I'd never seen a computer, and back then they cost $5 million and required 100 tons of air conditioning. But sure enough, it turns out that they didn't have room for me in the first class, and so I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and worked in the basement of a Lockheed Martin airplane plant where they were building the C-5A, and they happened to have an extra computer in the basement. And so in the 4 months that I was waiting to get into my class, I sat down with a bunch of manuals, and before long, I knew where all the zeros and ones in a computer were, and how you added and moved data and printed and put things on tape and stored. And so when I got to the computer class, I'd already had most of the answers, and they elected me as president, and I spent most of my time with the 30 students making sure everybody got through this class. And at the end of it, we had the highest achieving class that RCA had in terms of the graduation rate, and they asked me to stay and teach. So all of a sudden, in 6 months, I went from never seeing a computer to being a teacher in computer science. And so I did that for a few years until RCA went out of the computer business. And at that point, I came to the conclusion that this was a useless field anyway. At $5 million and 100 tons of air conditioning, who's going to want these things for very much? And so I decided to change fields and ended up migrating into the real estate field. I was actually putting together tax shelter, long-term income holding properties for wealthy individuals. And along the way, I acquired a number of properties in Florida, in the middle income, golf course communities, and the rest. And I got to meet people, and I saw this amazing lifestyle for people moving to Florida, around clubhouses and golf courses and being active. And the thought occurred to me that for every one person that goes to Florida, 20 stayed home for the right reasons. Community values, churches, kids, grandkids, extended work careers, whatever. But if you went back up into the eastern seaboard between Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, New York, whatever, the epicenter of seniors is back in the cities where they came from, not in Florida. And it's 20 times the market. So what I got to thinking was, why don't we create a social program for seniors that stayed home, but not for the 65-year-old. Let's do it for the 75-year-old. Because at that point in life, it was my opinion that there would be evidence of transition and things would start to occur, and then this is where the social structure of a major retirement community would start to have impact. Now the good thing was, I didn't have any experience, and sort of like my computer days, you didn't need any training. All you needed to do was have a social engineering mind. And so I came up with two ideas that changed the industry. Number one was, if you wanted to attack the middle America market, you needed to have a 100% refundable entrance deposit. The industry in 1983 had these endowment entry fees where you had to put up $200,000, it amortized over the next 3 to 5 years, and it was gone. Well, only the top 10% of the wealthy in the country would be interested in a program like that. But if you gave people 100% of their money back anytime they leave or die, so that their family gets the inheritance, then all they have to do is transfer their home equity. The second piece was, instead of a giant insurance plan that takes care of people for life, put together a fee-for-service plan that says, here's the basic services, and you pay for what you need above that. This way, you could sell your house, move into the retirement community, probably live there $200 cheaper than you were paying in your own home, and you could still have access to every service you need for the rest of your life. This program would be accessible to 70% of every senior in America that own their homes, and that's the percentage that own their homes free and clear, and that could move into your retirement community. Now, when you change the rules, it's really hard to put these things together, and so the next big hurdle was I didn't have any money. It was just an idea, and I really don't have any experience, so this is just social engineering at a guess, not a reality. And so I had to talk the finance community into putting up enough capital to see if I could put this idea to work. Well, I happened to come across an abandoned college seminary, back to my seminary days. It was a college seminary in Baltimore on 100 acres on the southwest corner of the city. And it had been empty for 4 years. I knew the group. In fact, they were the ones at Catholic University that taught me. So I proposed to them, why don't you let me convert this 100-acre abandoned campus into a senior housing project? And it's a long story I can't tell you today because it would take the rest of this class, but it's a very interesting path that occurred in order to bring this about. But eventually, I talked the local bank into giving me $5 million to renovate the first building and then to start moving people in and begin the transition of what would become the largest development operation for seniors in the country. And along the way, because I had no experience or training, I didn't have to follow anybody's rules, and so I could generally make things up depending upon how it turns out that I felt things were happening. Well, the industry all said, once you have your main building, you should put little cottages all over your 100 acres so that people can park their car in the driveway and unload their groceries. They'd rather do that than live in apartment buildings. Well, I had to renovate the college first, so I already had 250 people living in my old renovated college buildings. And when I looked at them, none of them would be served by parking in front of a duplex because it would be a nasty snowy day or rainy, icy, miserably hot. And anyway, they wouldn't come in and join the bridge club. They wouldn't get involved in things. So I erased all the cottages that were on my 100 acres and decided to keep building new buildings and apartment buildings connected. And connectivity became a real theme for how you put these communities together. So I added on a few more buildings, and then the next major threshold that I had to come across was the industry said, don't ever put too many old people together in one place. It'll be like an atomic reactor out of control. And it will implode into the awfulest mess you'll ever seen of old people, and no one will ever want to live there again. So don't ever put more than 300 apartments. And I'd already pushed it up to 400. And it was really getting, like I was getting nervous, what's gonna happen here? Well, they said, start over at the other end of your campus and build an all-new facility, but then I gotta go back to the banks and get more money, go back in debt. And so greed overcame me, and I just said, no, I'm just gonna keep adding on and see what happens. And if we have the atomic reactor explosion, we'll just live with it. Well, the more people you brought into the community, the more clubs that got built, and the more activities, the more bridge clubs, the more social structures. So I was doing pretty well, except for the fact that when you overcrowd everybody's dining room and you put too many people in too many spaces, it gets really a little bit complicated. So the residents got pretty mad at me. I was overcrowding. It was like going to church on Easter Sunday every day. And you couldn't find a space, and the dining room was stretched. And so eventually, though, I had enough people I could build my second dining room and my second clubhouse. And it was already paid for by all the people that had moved in. And so I didn't have to go back in debt. And when I opened up the second clubhouse, more clubs formed, more activities, and people had now multiple destinations. And it turns out that exponentially the life of the community began to grow, and it didn't turn into an atomic reactor. It went the opposite. And it became way more vibrant. It became like a college campus. And so I kept adding on. And I thought, well, how far can you go? And eventually I built the largest retirement community in the country with 1,600 independent units, 400 healthcare beds, 2,600 full-time residents. And it all worked. It worked financially. It worked to be a better lifestyle for people. It proved to be the right thing to do. And so then the question was, how far do you take this? And I could have stopped. It was perfectly successful and ended it. But then I thought, what would you do with the other millions of people that don't have the choice that the people in Baltimore had? So I decided to continue building and expand the company. And one of the big pivotal issues that John spoke about was the industry didn't have any depth of talent. It was mostly nonprofits. Nonprofits tend to be fairly narrow focused and very local in their judgment. And so there wasn't any talent that really looked at this as a national program. So we had to start developing our own training and talent and our program from scratch. And sat down and said, well, that's the reason you looked at my questions up here. What you really mostly need isn't experience. It's not someone who's already run a nursing home or operated a dining room. What you need is people with common sense that can make this happen. And so I started a program where we would hire about 100 to 150 new people a year from colleges, universities, graduate schools, people like John that were just out and starting a career but might be enticed into changing it. We could hire 100 to 150 people a year and circulate them through every department, through finance, through marketing, through dining services, physical plant management, healthcare. And if they found a spot that they wanted to land on, then that was their first job. So by hiring several hundred young people, 150 every year, you had people that didn't know what they couldn't do, and every time you would put them into a responsible activity, they would accomplish unbelievable new thresholds. And here's probably the place that had the most impact was if you hired the traditional nurse in a nursing home, they always wanted to come in and do it exactly their way. And they wanted to run it with all the people lined up in front of the nurse's station and charts the exact way. But if you took people who didn't know how to do it, they were way more caring and responsible for what would this person like? How would they feel? What did they want? And so instead of the regimented, regulated nursing environment, you could create a more vibrant, healthy service environment. And so in a nursing environment, everybody has to eat breakfast at 7:01 in the morning. And then you have to eat lunch by noon because a regulator will come in and say, you had 4 hours and 7 minutes between meals instead of 3 hours and 9 minutes, which is the limit. And all this kind of stuff. This is the way to do it. But if you don't take people that care about that, then they would let people eat a late breakfast. And if they want to skip lunch, they could do that. But if that's their quality of life, that was more important. And that's how we ended up developing our company and changing all the rules. And so that was the mainstay. And it actually led, I'll give a little promo here. This actually ultimately led to my founding the Erickson School of Aging Studies, because I realized that one of the next issues that we're going to need in this country is a generation of university level thinkers that would be willing to go out and change the rules and create new opportunities and new paths for aging. And I'm going to end in just a second here and give you question and answers, but
we could do the cases after.
oh, we're going to do the cases. Okay, we'll do that in a second. But one of the things you should think about, and I was talking to Dr. Snyder about this yesterday, is that the discretionary period of this 30 years he calls the last half of life, the 30-year period of life, is something that mankind has only experienced after World War II. Before World War II, everybody generally died at their workstation. If you go back longer in history, you were probably gored by a buffalo when you were hunting, or whatever. If you were an accountant, you had your green visor on and dropped dead at your desk. But most people didn't have an extended period of time.
Right?
What?
A lot of people didn't know you were dead.
That's right. It took a few days to figure that out. Anyway, so now after World War II, we have this long period of time where people are having 20 and 30 years of time to live in a discretionary environment. You could keep working, or you might not, or you could go get involved in new things. But it was a new period of time. And after 5 million years of living one way, and then you change the rules, we didn't do a very good job. And so the first time around, in the 50s and 60s, we told everybody when you're older, okay, your years are coming, but take it easy, don't overdo it. And we killed millions of people doing that. Because the answer was, use it or lose it, and stay active. It wasn't a, don't overdo it, always overdo it. And so then in the 80s, when I came along, and Paul Clausen from Sunrise and Bill Colson from Holiday, we looked at aging and said, hey, we can do a better job. Now, I attacked it from the point of social, medical, and large scale, because I figured you could do better by doing it that way. And so from 1980 forward, we've just begun saying what's the real best way that we can create quality of life in these last 25 years. And I would say to you all, the opportunity is wide open. We're only at this bare surface of creating the right environments to make this happen. And that's why I'm so pleased that at the Davis School and at the Erickson School, we're getting a group of university level thinkers to go out there and deal, whether it's the area aging agencies, whether it's the delivery services, it doesn't matter where you go, there will be opportunities to make a huge difference in the quality of life for people around you.